Good evening and welcome along to Fermentation and Whisky from Irish Whisky Review. Marty, is this all about wood and metal, or is there more to it than that?
Well, there's much more than that, Justin. Much more. It's actually quite scientific. I've had to do some research for this week, so I've been a busy boy.
Have you? All right, studying away then. So we've both got glasses this week, haven't we?
Yes. Well, I haven't poured myself anything yet.
No, well, I have still some of that tasting stuff left, but there you go. But it's actually lovely. I tried a wee drop it with the Mountain Dew. It actually goes very well with the Mountain Dew. Well, I know I shouldn't do it. I know you're going to tell me off now.
A wee cocktail umbrella, some cherries, possibly a wee sparkler or something like that with it, Justin, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to do that. I would love to do that. So what's been happening this week in whiskey then?
Well, Justin, I'm going to read the news this week in whiskey. And now, I normally wear glasses, so if I go a bit wonky in this and start feeling a bit dizzy, you'll know why. Now, this week in whiskey, saw the launch of two new Irish brands, or two new Irish expressions. These are from the big names, the big hitters. We had Middleton Very Rare 2020 released this week. Now, every year, Middleton releases their MVR. They are extremely collectible. They're limited to, and I know these days this is a huge number in relation to other bottlings, but they're limited to about 30,000 bottles roughly. Retails for about £180 this year. So the price of it started to creep up a little bit. But this is the last one that was made by the head distiller, Brian Nation. He's ventured off to pastures new over in the US. So this is his parting gift, and he read out a statement he had prepared. So this is quite exciting. I tasted it. It's very nice. It's very different from previous MVRs, which every year they sort of change the recipe. The head distiller gets to make this up, and he spends quite a lot of time doing it. The next one coming out, that'll be the first by the new distiller. So that was quite exciting. The next one was, and you were in on this too, Bushmills have released cask strength whiskies from the new Causeway collection. So this is a new thing. People have been kind of crying out for this for quite a long time. They brought out a 12-year-old muscatel cask, which is bottled at 53.5%, retails about £100, and a 25-year-old Malaga cask at 56.4%. Very potent, extremely good. I was really impressed by it. It's layers of flavour. It'll retail for about £400. Now, those are exclusive to the island of Ireland.
I must admit, Marty, they were the 1995 one. I thought was something particularly special.
It's so much flavour that you just have to let it work away, and you're always getting new things and working with it. The longer it sits, if you add a little bit more water to it, it's got lots of flavour. I'm really good, really impressed by it. The muscatel cask, not just so much, but that's just my opinion on that. Okay. Now, we're moving over to Macallan, Scotland. Now, Macallan have announced that they are going to release the Red series, which includes the oldest whiskies that they've ever released. Now, there's going to be 6 bottles in this collection.
This looks good. This looks really good. That looks really good.
Just hold your horses, Justin. Hold your horses, my friend. The Red collection, it relates to the name of the founder of Macallan, Alexander Reid, because Reid means red. Now, there are 6 bottles, a 40-year-old, a 50-year-old, a 60-year-old, a 71-year-old, a 74-year-old, and a 78-year-old bottling. Just my glasses. Now, don't you know the prices of these, Justin?
Okay, enlighten me.
Right. The 40-year-old is retailing for £11,300. Right? The 50-year-old jumps up a little bit, and it's going to be 37,500. The 60-year-old, 49,000. Sorry, 49,000. The 71-year-old, 58,500. The 74-year-old, 61,500, and the 78-year-old is a bargain at 65,500 quid. Now,
that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. If you want to have all 6 of these, and I'm going to hazard a guess and say, if you can afford these, you're not really going to drink them. I reckon none of these will ever be drunk. If you want the whole collection, that'll set you back £283,300. Not even you have that kind of money, Justin. Yeah. Now, on a lighter note, we go to Bulleit Bourbon. Now, Bulleit Frontier Whisky are owned by Diageo, and this week they announced that they are going to plant 1 million oak trees in the next 5 years. It's all part of an environmental drive that the company's going up with. They want to become carbon neutral, they want to help the environment, etc., etc. So they have teamed up with the North American Forestry Union, I think it's called, and they want to plant these 1 million oak trees. So there'll be white oak, obviously. Casks, making casks for whiskey, you use an awful lot of wood, so this is their way of putting it back. And now that'll soak up 645,000 tons of CO2. The Bulleit's owned by Diageo, and Sophie Kelly of Diageo North America said, "At Bulleit, we believe now more than ever that business have a responsibility to our environment, our communities, and our planet." So I think that's to be congratulated. I think more companies could do this kind of thing if we are to help the environmental problems. Big companies certainly should be able to have the resources to do this and help fight global warming and climate change. So that's the news from Bulleit Bourbon. Now, staying in the US, it's come to light this week that the Lone Star State, Texas, has really started to become almost a regional brand of whiskey. In the US, the US American Distilling Institute claims that the combined output of the US distilleries is 37 million 9-litre casks, but 20 million of those are made by just 2 brands, Jim Beam and Jack Daniels. The rest are made up by 1,600 different distilleries, and most of these are craft distilleries, little small, not producing huge amounts of product. Texas has 130 craft distilleries, so there's the name, obviously can't go through them all, but there's Balcones, Sun City, Rebecca Creek, Texas Teal, obviously lots more. But because of the climate of Texas, fairly hot and arid, but in certain places can become quite cold. There's a quite big swing in some places. It's having an effect. Now, it's a hot climate, and in some places the humidity can change quite a lot. So the Angel's share can be between 8 and 10%. Now, we talked about the Angel's share before. It's the amount of liquid that disappears. It's not necessarily always the alcohol. Depending on the humidity, it can be either the alcohol or the water. Now, some of these Texas whiskies are very young, but what seems to be happening is, because of the sort of geographical location of Texas, you start to have this effect that you're not getting in other places. So possibly in the not too distant future, Texas could be seen as a whiskey region in its own right. One, which is quite exciting in its own way. Now,
so we seem to have lost the audio there from Marty tonight. Marty, can you still hear me? Can you? Unfortunately, I don't think we can hear you at all. So I don't know what exactly is going on there tonight, but I seem to have lost you completely and in its entirety. I have no audio whatsoever from you at all. So that means that it's not ideal for our viewers because they cannot hear us whatsoever without the subtitles. So that there is a wee bit of a letdown. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click us out. Can you hear me, Marty?
I can, Justin. Yes, loud and clear.
You can hear me. I can't hear you. That is absolutely no good to man or beast because I can't hear you at all. So there we go. We will have to reconvene. I will be with you very, very shortly because I can't actually hear you at all. I don't know why I can't hear you. I'm going to turn the volume up. I have no volume at all. Do you know what? I can't get volume at all on my computer. No volume. Volume's disappeared altogether. Don't you love it when a show is live? This is like tomorrow's world. Nothing ever works. You can hear me, but I can't hear you. What is that all about? That is the most strangest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. So I'm going to change over to the other side. Can you hear me, Marty?
Yes, I can, brother.
All right. Well, there you go. We've just done away with the headphones. I hope there's no echo.
So can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Maybe my headphones have stopped working. I have no idea. No idea what that's about. But there you go. We're back in the room now. Put your hands up at home if you can hear us. There you go. We've seen that. You can hear us. You can hear both of us, but we couldn't hear each other. Listen, is that the news for this week then? Is that it?
The only thing is, I would say, Justin, this is the software which just before we went on air, you said this is so easy, even you could use it, Marty.
Well, I didn't change any of the settings, and they actually it could be my headphones. Now they are cheap headphones, but they're quite good, and I do go through about one a year, and they're about they maybe are a year old. But just so you know who this is, we'll put this up on screen. This is the company. This is the company that I don't know what happened to the audio there. It went, but I hadn't changed any of the settings, but it just went all of a sudden. So that's who we're coming to you by tonight. And you know where they're based? Do you know where they're based? They're based in Texas.
They are not.
I'm not making this up. You Google Restream are based in Texas. They are indeed.
Good things come from Texas.
You can tweet them that. Tweet them that. So listen, there's quite a lot of people watching tonight because you can stream to over 30 platforms at once, and there was well over that number watching at one time. As you know, when we do these shows, we get a lot of viewers all around the world. We'll be getting to your comments in a minute, but we still have to do Beam Suntory, don't we?
We have one more article to do. Beam Suntory have unveiled a world blend whiskey. AO. It's a Japanese word that describes blue or green colours. And it's to describe the ocean that connects Japan, Scotland, Ireland, Canada, and the US, which is where they're taking their whiskies from to put into this new blend. Now, it's going to be a travel retail exclusive. You can only buy it at airports. It retails for about £60. Now, they aren't making available where they're getting their whiskies from, but one assumes that it's brands that they own. Now, I'm going to give you a little indication of what Beam Suntory own. And this is just from my collection, and I'm going to dip in behind the table, which I know people like. So we have a Suntory, so that'll be their Japanese bit. They own Lefroy, they own Cooley, they own Bowmore, they own Auchentoshan, they own Knob Creek, they own Maker's Mark, they own Basil Hayden's, they own Piggy, they own Canadian Club, Alberta Premium. I could go on and on and on and on.
Do they own it as well, do they?
They own and Tab. No, they don't own. They don't own. They don't own. I don't know whether they own Lucozade or not, but they own pretty much everything. They own loads of types of vodkas and all that kind of stuff. So they're going to bring out a world whiskey, and who knows what it'll be like. But I almost forgot. Must shuffle my paper. That's this week in whiskey.
All right. Thanks for that, Marty. Now, that was This Week in Whiskey. We're trying to do that every week at the start of the show. There is a lot happens every week. So if you see something you want us to cover, remember to get in touch. Tag us in it on Facebook or send it through us via YouTube. Remember, it's Irish Whiskey Review on both channels. It's dead easy to find. And make sure you follow us on Irish Whiskey Review on YouTube and Facebook. Now, Marty, we better get through some of these chats because there's a lot of people in tonight already. We better say hi to them all systematically before we get thrown in at the deep end to fermentation, which is this week's show's about. If you'd like to ask us any questions about fermentation, get ready to type them in. We will see them. We'll put them on screen, and well, you can get your answer. Now, let me see who was first in tonight. Mark Kerr. He must be sitting outside my house, tuning into my internet to see when we go live. Evening, Mark. Evening to you. Trevor Watson saying hi. Regular viewer. James and Moira Doherty saying hello. Good evening to you. There's Julie Mason. Evening, Marty and Justin. Smiley face. There we go. Patrick Mulkey saying good evening, all. And let me see. First visit. Love hearing my home accents. Now, I don't think Glenda Taylor is here. I think Glenda Taylor's somewhere exotic because there was another message from her popped up somewhere, but I don't know where it's gone. Jody Burke saying, so another Saturday with the boys. Prince Edward Island, Canada is watching.
Excellent.
We're watching news, watching us. Evening, lads. Justin likes Del Boy drinks. Yes, I do like Del Boy drinks. I do like cocktails. Julie saying it's a nice touch with the glasses. It is indeed.
Glasses. I put them on for effect.
Yeah.
Does he?
Are they real or are they fake?
I bought them. I bought them. They're actually very light reading glasses, but there is a little magnification on them. In fact, they're more potent than I thought. I have 20/20 vision, Justin. So
you must be over 40. 40. There's Mark Kerr saying you suit the Gleeks, Marty. There you go.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Glenda saying too pricey. Is that a different Glenda? Yeah, it's the same Glenda. She's saying it's too pricey. That must have been the Macallans, was it?
Oh, well, I think everybody would agree they were too pricey. But maybe she's talking about the boot.
Don't know. Hold on. What do you see? What time it came in at? It came in at 6 minutes past. That would.
Well, a bit further on than the so it must have been the Macallan. So it's a bit pricey at that moment, I think. Euro
saying good evening. Stanley saying he'll have one each of the 6, I think.
The tech has money to get it, you know.
Glenda's saying it's not happening. Trevor saying OMG. Must have been about the these don't appear on my screen instantaneously, by the way, and I have to flick to a different screen to see these, so we can't interrupt Marty when he's going through it, unfortunately. But always reference in the thing what you're talking about. Glenda's saying I drink Bullet here all the time. She's in California. She is in California. Look, she's in California.
California dreaming, huh?
Yeah, she is. Glenda, make sure you tell all your friends that like whiskey in California about this. Stanley Sung is tagging John Adair. Stanley Sung's tagging Ian Ward. Yeah, Texas. Yeah, it is. Julie, can you confirm that Restream is in Texas? Tell them my headphone audio cut out there. They'll probably say it's my Macintosh's fault. What do you see? Frank Heron is saying, unfortunately, I do not have the funds to buy the whole collection, but I only buy whiskey to drink, not as an investment. There you go. Nothing wrong with that at all, is there?
Absolutely nothing at all. But I rather imagine none of those will ever be cracked open, and if they are, it'll be like some Arab sheik on holiday somewhere.
Yes. I can hear Marty on Facebook. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear Justin, but I couldn't hear Marty, so I don't know what he said to me, because it's always something nasty he says to me, isn't it?
Nice to you, Justin. I'm always nice.
No worries, guys. We can hear both of you, but I couldn't hear Marty. I
Yeah.
knew he could hear me because I could see him responding to what I was speaking. Would McAllen take a trade in for a bottle? Don't need my escort. I can hear you both. There you go. There you go. I can hear Marty too, but I'm hearing it through the TV rather than the headphones. And this week there isn't any echo at all. How does that work?
That's great.
Keep talking, Marty. I love Redbreast. Any new whiskies there? I thought we covered that last week, did we?
No, we don't talk about the new Redbreast advert. I don't know if there's any new Dreamcast. Dreamcast won't come out until next year, so no, I don't think there's any real news from Redbreast just at the minute. Although I did hear someone talk about a Redbreast Lost Out cask strength edition. So whether that's going to be a product or not, I don't know.
So, thought I'd seen something about myself. 50p in the meter there. Pour a glass and sip, and normal service will be resumed. Yeah, sometimes it's the internet glitch, and you never know. You just never know.
The joy of going live.
Let me see. Get new AA batteries. It's me and powered that one. Sit back, Justin, and have a drink and enjoy Marty. I was going to do that. As you can see, I've enjoyed these little drinks already. There's that many. Hold on, we better get. Oh my God, under the table again. Is AO not a word for a horrible person? That is true. I never thought of that.
I never thought of that either. I was trying to be sophisticated and erudite, cosmopolitan, but
no. Marty reminded me of Tommy Cooper bottle glass sketch. Yeah. Oh, the filling up the bottle. Yeah, it never filled up. Yeah. Hello from Alaska. Hello.
Hello.
Right. What time is it in Alaska? I'm sure it's 10 hours behind us. Let's learn fermentation. Jordy, what are you trying to do? You don't like the news? We'll have to do the hellos. If we don't do the hellos, you guys are hilarious. I'll be following. Yes, make sure you like us. Listen, there's loads of people watching. Sometimes when we go into it too quick, we don't get everybody on board before we even do the thing. But we better do the show tonight. Otherwise, I'll just be reading out the questions. 122 in Alaska. There's your answer.
Oh, 9 hours behind it. 9 hours.
Okay, so here we go. This is the show. Away we go.
Now, fermentation. Fermentation is probably the most important part of any beer or spirit, alcoholic beverage production, because it's really where the magic happens. Now, when I say magic, it is a little bit of a miracle when you think about it, and not least denigrate anybody's religious feeling, but in the Bible, a miracle was that Jesus turned water into wine. Well, yeast kind of do exactly the same thing. You know, they take fairly useless products like water and grain and manage to turn them into marvelous alcohol, which is in a way a miracle. Now, they reckon yeast evolved this as a method of defense. Now, how they've come to this conclusion, I'm not 100% sure, but alcohol kills microbes. That's why all our hand sanitizers are 60 to 80% alcohol, because it kills off microbes. So yeast were having to compete with microbes to eat, well, not initially soft fruits, but what they eat, other bacteria were trying to eat as well. So if you can produce alcohol, it means you kill them off, and that's how they reckon it happened. Now, this little miracle is how all alcohol is produced. Now, we've talked a little bit before about the grain, whether it's corn or rye or barley or whatever. It gets milled up into this flour, this grist, and then it gets washed, put into water, hot water, to extract the carbohydrates out of it and break down into the sugars and make it easy for the yeast to eat. Now, when these go into the fermenting tanks, The fermentation tanks are called washbacks. These can be made of various materials, so steel, stainless steel, wood, and sometimes even cement whenever it's on a huge scale. And there's reasons for using different ones. The wooden ones, some say they impart better flavors, but they're quite limited because they can't be too big. They're also harder to clean. You can't use any chemicals on them, but they're quite cheap. Stainless steel, obviously, doesn't corrode, and it's very good at protecting. It's very easy to manufacture, but they are expensive. They're also very easy to clean, and so on and so forth. So this sugar-filled wort comes down in, and yeast is added. Now, when it comes of the mash tun, it's quite hot because the heat pulls out the sugar. And one of the things that you need in this liquid is it has to have the sugar in it, which makes it more dense than water. Obviously, you're putting more stuff in it, so it has to be loaded with the sugar, so it becomes quite dense. When it comes out of the mash tun, it's hot. Now, yeast can't survive at temperatures above 35 degrees centigrade. So what has to happen is it has to be cooled down. Now, they cool it down to 15 to 20, 25 degrees centigrade. And all of these processes, distilleries do them in different ways. So there's no real hard and fast way of saying has to be done this way. So it comes down. This original gravity will be higher than water. And this is kind of fundamental to it, because that tells you how much sugar is in this wort that's coming down. And the sugar is what the yeast need to eat to produce what they need to produce. Okay, now when they're making the washbacks out of wood, it's normally larch or Oregon pine. It's normally what it is because it grows very straight.
Can you tell what this one is? Is this larch or Oregon pine there in that picture? Do you know?
I can't remember. Those I took when I was at Springbank. I was over at Springbank. The Glengyle distillery, Kilkieran and whatnot. That's their washbacks.
Not all distilleries like you taking pictures of that process. Sure, they don't. No.
Lots of them get really nerved about you doing it. Other ones say it's fine. Other ones say that you can cause an explosion and stuff. I don't know. They've all little idiosyncratic ways of doing things, you know.
Yeah.
Now, so when this comes into your washback, now I've had to make a few notes here because it can get quite confusing sometimes. Now, the yeast that they use mostly, and again, I have to be very careful here because not everybody does the same, is a Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is known as brewer's yeast. It was originally discovered on grape skins, but it was isolated and grew from there. That's where it naturally occurs. But there are hundreds of different types of yeasts, and some are used sometimes and some are not used, and most of the time it's brewer's yeast that's used because it's commercially very available. You know what you're going to get with it, and it's reasonable priced. Now, yeasts need certain conditions in order to be optimized to do what they need to do. Now, you need to control the pH. It has to be hygienic, because obviously yeasts are going to be competing with other bacteria, and bacteria are much, much smaller than yeast. So you have to almost have sterile conditions in order for the yeast to go. You have this rich sugary liquid. You have this sugary liquid. So spoiling bacteria are attracted to it. So it's imperative that you don't let them get there first, because once the yeasts come, then they have to compete and so on and so forth, and you end up with off flavors. Now, the off flavors, you can be talking about parts per billion. And to put that into context, you could be talking like a drop in a swimming pool, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and that's how sensitive it is for us to detect. So it has to be clean. That's why lots and lots of distilleries prefer to use stainless steel, because it's obviously much easier to clean than wood. So once you have your yeast, you have to put it in to your wort, into this liquid. Now it comes in three forms. You have dried, you have a compound, and a cake. And each of these have different qualities, and each distillery prefers one over the other, certainly in terms of price. Dried yeast, it's obviously easier to store, it lasts longer, etc., etc. But different distillers, depending on what they want, will use different processes, will use different inoculation rates, how they put it in, etc., etc. Again, it comes down to the personal preference of the distiller, and this will be done through trial and error, like everything else. Now, to give you an idea of how small the yeast cells are, because these are singular cell funguses.
I mean, these are under an electron microscope, these here, aren't they?
Yeah, they will be. I mean, they to give you an idea of how they're measured, it's normally 20 billion per litre. Now, if you imagine the size of some of those big fermentation tanks, you have 20 billion yeast cells per litre, and you could have 30,000 litres. It gives you an idea of just how tiny they are.
Yeah, they're certainly very small, but very, very powerful. I mean, they're used in lots of other things, yeast, like bread and as well.
Absolutely. And they do perform that. I mean, it is a Latin miracle. There's no other way around that. Now, once the yeast goes in, really goes through a process where you have 4 phases. The phase 1 is known as the lag phase. So the yeast is pitched in to this sugary wort, and nothing really happens for a few hours. As the yeast go in, they start to go, oh, I'm hungry, and start chewing. And once they start doing that, they start to multiply and breed, essentially. So the nutrients that the yeasts need are, they need minerals, they need certain vitamins, and they need amino acids, which are present in the cereal. I mean, they eat their food source is the sugar, but they need these other things to metabolize, to grow, see every other living thing. So a couple of hours, nothing really happens. Then phase 2 kicks in, the growth phase. Now, the growth phase starts between 3 and 24 hours after. Again, it depends on the conditions and what you're actually fermenting. And this is where the yeast take on board what they need, the sugar, they take the sugar, the nutrients, but they also take on the oxygen that's liquid, that's inside the liquid. So this is the aerobic phase. So they use up all the oxygen, the specific gravity. Remember, I told you this is loaded with sugar. It starts to fall because the sugar is being used up, and alcohol has it's less dense than water. Now, the growth phase uses up all the oxygen, and what's happening there is, I did a little drawing before this, Justin, because I couldn't find an accurate picture online. They're all a bit too scientific, and so that you can understand it, Justin, I did a little drawing. Okay.
Okay, let me see it.
Okay, look, you see, you have the sugar and the nutrients going in. This is the yeast cell. So the energy, it produces energy, and then you've got CO2, you have your ethanol, you have new yeast cells being produced, and heat. Okay, so it starts to warm up. Okay, it starts to get warmer. Now, during the growth phase, the oxygen is all used up. Then, afterwards, You have the fermentation phase, and this is when the main bulk of the conversion will happen. All the fermentable, sorry, the fermentation phase, all the oxygen is used up, and you move over to an anaerobic phase. Yeasts are amazing at surviving. They can actually survive. They can actually survive off ethanol. They can actually live off the stuff that they produce, which is quite unique. You know, they create a waste product, but then can reuse it again to fuel themselves. Because I mean, alcohol is a great fuel. You can set fire to it. You know, that's how much energy it contains. So this is then the anaerobic phase. Now they use up all the nutrients that they can then, and then they start to run out. Now, as they start to run out, you run into the post-fermentation phase, which is after all the fermentable carbs have been eaten. There's no more alcohol produced, and that's really the end of the end of the cycle. I've done a little drawing here, and this is for glucose. This is just a little easy way of doing it. The glucose cell is C6H12O6. Okay. The yeast munchy, 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 and it produces 2 carbon dioxide molecules. It produces then 2 ethanol molecules as well. So you get 2 CO2, 2 C2H5OH, which is ethanol, and then you get your heat and then your biomass, because as the yeast starts to die off, they die, and they have this sort of biomass, and that's important for some other reasons later on. You're now left with what's called wash. And this wash is basically a beer. Now, it's quite a strong beer. It's in and around sort of 8%. It can be up to 8%. Again, this is all down to the distiller. They'll tweak it to whatever recipe they want to have. So you have that. Now, the key conditions, as I said, are the pH. But you need to monitor the total acidity, the final gravity, the original gravity, the alcohol concentration, the residual sugar concentrations, the temperature, the fermenter yield, and the raw material weights. All of this has to be taken into account just to make the beer. So you can see how complicated all of this is, you know, and all the processes that are going on all the time with this. Okay. Now, total time, it can be 2 to 4 days, so 45 hours to 100 hours, again depending on the distiller and what grain it's from. Other spirits and other fermentable sugars take longer than this again. So you can have brandy can take 2 weeks, and Calvados, the apple brandy, you've had Calvados, it can take up to 6 months to ferment. But you're always going to be going against time for economic reasons, spoilage reasons, etc., etc. So, you know, cereal fermentation has to be done fairly quickly. It can be done really, really quick.
So Mark's saying he's heard Guinness kept brewing during lockdown to keep their yeast strain alive, despite having to convert the stout to fertilizer. Don't know, haven't heard that one.
I didn't hear that they had to keep their yeast alive, but during lockdown, the amount of beer that's going to be wasted. I mean, the millions of gallons of it, which they did find out that they can turn it into an animal feed, which is what they do actually with the cereal after they've taken out the sugars out of it. A lot of that goes, it's a draft, it's called, and they send it out for sheep to eat, it sounds like.
And he adds, what Marty is saying is that distillers are magicians. That's what we would like to think.
I like to think that they are a little bit, yeah. But that's taken away from what the bacteria, from what the yeast do. Again, there's lots of other things going on in the process that no one really understands. It's not known to science, because there's bacteria can help with the flavor compounds as well. But if there's too much of it, then that brings in off flavors. It's a very, very, very complicated process. But ultimately, that's where the magic starts. You can add everything is created in your new make spirit at the fermentation stage. The distillation is only taking away stuff you don't want and leaving the stuff that you do. So it's those little yeast that make all the flavor compounds in the new make spirit. Once it goes into a cask, that's a different scenario. But the new make spirit is all done by the yeasts and possibly some of the bacteria. Again, this is not particularly well understood. Now, I said what's left after the yeasts have done their work and the liquid's drained off and head off to the still feeds. After that, you have this stillage, this leftover. And it all again, it can depend on what the distiller has allowed in the washback, what's left over. You'll have possibly heard of sour mash.
Yep.
Sour mash whiskies. That's where they take a portion of what's left there and add it to the mash bill of the next batch. And the idea behind that is you're taking some of the bacteria, some of the dead yeast cells, whatever it is that's in there that you want, and adding it to the next batch to give yourself to regulate acidity levels, to introduce bacteria that will then produce flavor compounds later on. It's very complicated, but that's what sour mash means. Okay.
This show seems to be one of these ones that verges from, science like this here, which blows your mind, to you basically saying that distillers are magicians and that you're basically telling people that alcohol is really yeast P. I mean, look at this. Yeast is like a Pac-Man that eats sugar, farts CO2, and pees alcohol.
That's essentially it. It's a very bizarre thing, and the fact that it's done on an industrial scale really does make your head spin when you think about it. It's very easy to become sort of complacent about this, but there's so many factors and so much going on that it's a miracle that it happens. So you have this interplay between what you're putting in, what the yeast does, how long you leave it, the temperatures, the pH, all of these factors affect the flavour. Now, if you think about that, over the years, you're trying to create a consistent product all the time because your customer, they don't really care what you've done. They just want, I want to buy that bottle and know that it tastes of the same as it tasted 3 months ago or 5 years ago. And you have to try and get all of that correct, because if you get it wrong to start with, there's nothing you can do to get it back, really. So it has to be right all the time. And if you take that,
well, how come we can try something fresh from a new distillery, right? Mm-hmm. And it'll taste not so bad, and then we'll taste something old from an old distillery, and it's pretty darn good. But yet the old distillery's middle-aged one isn't any good, or doesn't really live up to their expectations. I mean, the people that do these things know what they're doing. I mean, we know know what they're doing because at Bushmill, she's been doing it a long time, indeed,
and she's fabulous at it. Now, but what Helen Mulholland at Bushmills is the blender. She's not the distiller.
Right.
Now, blender, I've said about this before. The distiller is the science guy. He's the brainiac, the glasses wearing guy. He's that guy.
Okay.
Because he has to control, or she, they have to control whatever chemical processes there are to get that right. You have, yourself, Justin. We talked about this the other day, barley. That head of barley is different from other heads of barley. it has different moisture contents, or different nitrogen contents, etc., etc., etc. And all of these are slight variables, and you have to get it right, that product, right at the end. Your new mech spirit has to be right. Otherwise, you put it in a cask, and it's always going to be totally different 10 years down the line. Now, some people, for example, I know Lefroy, they cannot abide the stuff. They just think it's awful. I was going to have one, but I don't think it's bother now because it's something else. And if you take a Lefroy, you're always tasting Lefroy for hours. So all of this, Lefroy really gets its flavour from after the yeasts have done their work. You have this body of liquid, the wash, and like I said, it still only takes away stuff you don't want and leaves what was already there. So the distiller, you cut it a bit later and have in some of the phenols at the end, so you have that sort of medicinal thing. But that's already there. There's nothing stopping you from doing that really with any of these brands. It's just that comes down to the distiller. But that's already been done by the yeast. The yeast have already done all of this.
Some fantastic comments coming in here. Blender has to fix the distiller's boohoos. Yeah.
They can do, yes.
We've seen that done in the shipyard before. The wee man rescuing the bridge by bending the feet back in the other direction at night.
I heard about a guy in Caterpillar when guys were working on stuff and used to drop their spanners into like tanks, and they were going to have to cut them to try and pull them out. So what they did was they pushed them over until the spanner went into a corner, and the welder then just held the welder until the spanner melted inside the tank, so it didn't rattle about. So
that's a good one. I haven't heard that one before. There you have Mark saying he put his last 1608 into the infinity bottle. See Justin and Marty's earlier show. They must be commenting between themselves on there, and we sometimes can't see them things because of privacy settings. Michael Matthews is saying, great captions, Justin. I think it was these graphics he was talking about, like the Pac-Man. I didn't do the graphics. Marty acquired them. The mem generators mentioned there. Look at that there. There you go.
Now, one last thing I want to talk about is the different spirits and different products. The yeasts are different, and the fermentation times are different, etc., etc. For beer, obviously, it's different again. For wine, it's different, etc., etc. One of the things that I find really interesting is in rums. We've heard about the sour mash, where you take some of this stillage, some of the leftover, the dead yeast cells and all that, and put it into the next batch. In rum production, there's a process called dunder, which is something very similar. But back in the day in Jamaica, what they used to do was they used to take this stillage out and dump it in a pit, okay? And these became known as dunder pits. Now, all of these dead yeast cells and different acids and so on and so forth were dumped into these pits. And loads of flies laid eggs in them and all manner of stuff went into this muck. Okay?
Is this what I'm going to show you next? Is this it?
I'd imagine it is what you're going to show. It's kind of just a pit. Now, you imagine in Jamaica, there's going to be lots of fruit flies flying about around because there's still going to be residual sugar and that kind of stuff in there, or certainly residual stuff that they can munch on or certainly eat. Now, that dunder pit, that muck that's in there, it can be in there for years. And some rum producers use this to go into their mash, into their wort.
Is that why I like rum so much?
Some of it, I've read books that have said certain rums, they used to throw dead carcasses and stuff into them as well. And this produced these bacteria the end they were putting into the mash to then go in and get to basically compete, if you like, in some ways with the yeasts, and for the yeasts to kill them up. And this produced these chemicals that produced into the rum. Now, imagine once it went into the still, it'll kill off any chance of any pathogens or bacteria or whatever. But I would imagine if some people knew how some of these rums were produced, they probably wouldn't be overly keen on it. You know, it's about like never find out how your food's made, Justin.
I do watch that show sometimes with the big baldy guy of Master Chef, and it's very interesting. But I have known for years that a lot of numbers are actually, many of them are byproducts of other things, and I once went to an art exhibition, and there was a book made of pigs that showed you the 200 things that pigs go into, so no part of the animal carcass is wasted. So I mean, I'd be pleased to know if some of those little salty swimming pigs in Jamaica went into my rum.
The salty swimming pigs. Me and you were both at that. That was that book where it was covered in the pigskin on the outside. You and I were both.
I forgot you were there too. That's right, you were there. Yeah.
As well, it's quite interesting. Never find out all the how they use pig teeth and stuff. Which in some ways is quite disgusting. But now that's fermentation, and I know it's quite complicated and probably a little bit boring in parts, but it's really the key point of all alcoholic spirits. That's how it's done.
I mean, yeah, it is scary, Marty. No, did my wife left her? No, she did it of her own accord. That's the Jamaica joke. My wife left me.
Right.
Jamaica? No, she went of her own accord. Do you not know that one? No, I think that's a good one.
I had a long day, Justin. It's got long.
That's a very good one. Do you not like that one?
No.
Do you not like that one? Right. All right, we'll hide that. So we've got about 10 minutes left tonight, 8 minutes left tonight. I don't want to run over, because if I run over, well, it's too much work to clip it down to a part that makes sense.
So that is basically fermentation. I hope I explained that okay. I know it's quite complicated and in some part probably a little bit boring, but that's how booze is made. So
no, you did, Marty, but it seems to go. This is our most extreme show yet, because it goes from the most complicated formula and graphs like this to absolutely crazy things like this. Like this, and then it goes to a pit of muck, a dunder pit. I mean, that is a far out show.
Yeah, we kind of always want to keep these things light-hearted, but whenever you're talking about some of this stuff, you can't not do a bit of the sciencey stuff. You do the whole sort of range. But I hope that explains it for most people. There are other forms of fermentation, and other yeasts can be used, and there's lots of experiment. There's companies now who are basically purposely looking for different yeasts to get different flavors, but it's the yeast that does all the work, essentially. The distiller's only there to make sure that their environment's okay.
So we're maybe getting a bit high end. We're maybe getting like those those fuddy-duddies that we see in other shows. People are saying, will you do a show about the best bottles under 20, under 30, and under 40, etc.? That's a good idea.
Okay, but
who was it asked for this show, by the way? Somebody specifically asked for fermentation.
Someone asked a few weeks ago if I would do one on fermentation. I can't remember who, but that's why this was logged in their head. We do try and please our audience, Justin. We do try and keep it as light-hearted as possible, but whenever people ask you for something, kind of not really any way of dumbing it down,
There's Trevor saying it's a very interesting subject. It would take me a couple of classes to get it all in. Classes are glasses, Trevor. Classes are glasses.
Yeah.
Awesome info tonight. Love it. Thank you very much for that. But you've got to remember, you're a Canadian, Geordie. You're a Canadian.
They're more Canadian rye whiskies and beer. Yeah, lovely. I do like a bit of a rye whiskey with a nice wee peppery kick off it. There's a lot more rye coming into Irish whiskey now too because of the pot still. That mash bill. Yeah, might be peppery kicks.
We could start an argument. You know, there's Michael from Alaska. Is Alaska part of Canada, Michael?
Oh, no.
I'm only trying to start a friendly argument.
Oh, yes. I've made the mistake a few times of saying to a Canadian, what part of the States are you from? I'm from Canada. Sorry. It's a bit like saying to someone from Portugal, are you from Spain? It doesn't go down that well, you know?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. A friend of mine's actually going to Portugal on Thursday, you know.
Wish I was going to Portugal.
Here, listen, Michael Matthews, we've started an argument here. Michael Matthews is saying, no, America. No, Michael, I know Alaska is part of America. It used to belong to Russia, but they sold it for a few million to America. I don't know, not that long ago.
No, that's only in the 1930s or something.
Something like that. Something like
that. The state in the early 50s, I think.
Something like that. Interesting and fun. Another great show. Thanks, Marty and Justin. Yes, thanks very much, folks. Make sure you go to the Irish Whiskey Review on YouTube. Irish Whiskey Review on YouTube, spelt that way, EY and IEW, not UE. And make sure you subscribe and hit the bell there because, well, it doesn't cost them. All you need to do is be logged into your Google account. You have to have a Google account because otherwise your Android phone won't work otherwise. So you all have Google accounts and log in there to YouTube and hit subscribe. Please do that. So there's a lot of people watching from all over the world tonight. We don't have anybody from Japan watching yet, and we do mention Suntory. And somebody told me there's about 150 Japanese whiskies. Is that you or somebody else was telling me that?
There's a whole pile. There's not as many distilleries as people think. Japanese whiskey kind of tries to focus on quality and how they do it. Although they're sort of moving away from that. The reputation's a bit down the pan, but. No, there's not as many distilleries as you would think in Japan, but again, they have a number of different brands. But there's a bit to go yet before they catch up with the US, for example.
Yeah.
Which said earlier on 1,600 whiskey distilleries now.
Yeah. Loads of info tonight, you have to say. It is there's loads of info every night. I mean, you wouldn't think, you know, when you say one word like fermentation, how much is involved in it.
But like I said, I had to trim down an awful lot of stuff to try and get it to fit into half an hour. I could go on and off. I can talk about malolactic fermentations. I could talk about all the different yeasts and all the different stuff that can go wrong and why they go wrong and what they produce. And it would just be boring as hell, to be honest. But you kind of understand it. Doing something like that, you have to try and pare everything down, and it's quite difficult. But
yeah. Yeah, there's Trevor's also saying it would be good to do the 30, 40, 50 whiskey. Yeah, thanks for that. I use message each other now, boys, because Mark said the same thing as well. I think you're messaging or reading the messages because they are public. But listen, do you like the news at the start? Because if we didn't do the news at the start, we wouldn't cover that topic until months down the line, really, Marty, would we?
Well, I kind of like doing a bit of the news at the start because there's so much happens in the whiskey world. And I like highlighting the fact that, you know, Bullet are planting 1 million oak trees. I like highlighting these things because it's very easy to criticise big companies like Diageo for doing this and practices that you disagree with. But when they do something like that, or one of the brands do something like that, it should be applauded. You know, it's very easy to be critical. So I like highlighting this kind of stuff. And you know,
we're getting some great comments in tonight. By the way, as a result of previous shows, I bought a bottle of Sex. Nice whiskey, but what a horrible bottle. Have you got Sex in there?
What's wrong with that?
I like that bottle.
That's a beautiful bottle. I was going to include a bit about Alex Thomas, who used to work at Bushmills, and still sort of works in Bushmills. And this is her baby, and good on her. She was chosen by Proximo, who are part of Jose Cuervo, to make a whiskey, and she brought out a single malt. In some ways related to their father. I love the bottle. I think the bottle's best part about it, if I'm totally honest.
And then we have other questions like this. John James Burns, it'd be nice to hear about the macrolactic and the solid state fermentation. I think would bore you to death if Marty went into that.
It put like this: malolactic fermentation, malic acid. This fermentation produces lactic acid and CO2, and it happens more so in wine and all that kind of stuff. It put like this: there'd be no fun memes in that.
Hey, listen, this £30 one's catching people's imagination. We'll leave it with this. Jonathan McCulloch is saying, if you had £30, Marty, what would you buy?
Well, I'll give you a hint. During the week, I bought a bottle of Black Bush at £25 for a litre. It was on Amazon Prime Day, and I know everybody will go, "Oh, you should be buying off Amazon." £25 for a litre of Black Bush. It's fabulous whiskey, and that's probably what I would buy.
Yeah, there you go. Good. Gosh, it didn't have to go quick tonight. It didn't have to go quick. What we'll do is we'll run until 5 past here, Marty, to make up for the lost time with the sound time, because then I'll be able to cut that out and I'll put it in the final edit for Instagram, which we can't do at the same time because it's too complicated to do. I did try to do it this week, but it's proven too complicated for me because I hate computers, really, even though I've had one since 1983 and I've been online since 1989. Great there. Mark was saying, needs a little jingle, though. Yeah, we're working on a jingle for the news headlines, but they were looking too much money for it, so I decided not to do it. I have a great jingle. I'll maybe send you a sample of it privately, Mark, so as you can hear it, because if I play it on this, I'll have to pay the money for it.
Is there any musicians out there? Is there any musicians out there that could compose us a little jingle? And then say,
well, I used to know a boy that did it, but he went and died on me, so he would have been able to do a jingle for us. I actually always fancied a theme tune. So that's about it, folks. Mark saying he loved batch books. Thanks for watching all over the world, in Alaska and Canada. Always say hello, always comment, like, and share so as we know you're there. I hope you've enjoyed it. Fermentation was a show that somebody asked for, and you learned something new. I mean, I didn't even know they did concrete ones at all, Marty. Concrete fats.
I feel like that will be in the big industrial ones. There'll not be too many touristy ones that will take you in and show you a concrete washback. Do
you think would Walkers need to be doing that for the quantity that they have?
No. They still won't do it. What you're talking about is industrial scale alcohol production,
right?
Which Cooley down in County Louth, that's what they were before Dr. Peeling bought it over and converted it. Now, I don't think they have I've never been around Cooley, but they were a big time whiskey alcohol producer for industrial purposes, and then he converted it. So I would imagine they possibly had a concrete washback, and that would have been done away with and turned it over to spirit production. I would have thought, possibly, maybe, I don't know. Okay,
that's it. A lot of mentions still coming in. Thanks for a great night, guys. Enjoyed it as always. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. And then Patrick Mulsey saying, I'm drinking Backbridge at the moment, €26 in Tesco's, £21 using percentage, which is, I would say, sterling euro voucher. There you go.
I seldom ever have Black Bush in the house because when it comes in, I drink it. That sounds sort of counterproductive, but nonetheless, that's what happens. If I bring it in, I normally play through it before I drink anything else. Okay. Any idea what next week's going to be, Marty? No? Well, I'll tell you, I'll let you know about Thursday afternoon sometime. I just don't really want to think of it. You told me about Sunday or Monday that we're going to do fermentation this week. I did, Justin, because I appreciated the fact that it was going to be quite difficult for me to do and cut back on lots of stuff. So I had to spend a bit of time doing this week. He skipped through everything. I loaded up a wee jingle there just for badness to play for him. Oh, we're not off. We're still on. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.